a huge thank you to the team that's in this room and not in this room, but was in here last night. To those of you that, to those that got to go home and get a little sleep. But a huge thank you from me to all the emergency management folks, both statewide as well as our municipal, local leaders who helped us out in the last 48 hours to get through yet another tough storm. We had, as you know, over 45 road closures throughout the state, flooding, extensive flooding. The Lake Champlain is, we expect, getting awfully near flood levels once again. I think we expect it to hit 100 feet sometime today. So we wouldn't get through this without all the hard work of emergency management. I want to thank Joe Flynn for his leadership, the team here for all their hard work, and you know, the fact that we get away with storms like this without folks losing life, really getting severely injured, is a credit to your great work. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I know that Vermonters who were sleeping last night, thank you for staying up and working the long hours to make a difference and keep us safe. Be happy to take questions if you have them.
Governor Michael Page from Fox 44. Can you get any more specific about washouts or culvert issues today in terms of numbers, locations? We saw one road, I believe, in Kirby of a washout, Mud Hollow Road, I believe.
Right.
Any others that you've heard of that are significant?
We had about nearly 45 roads closed in Vermont, and if you look at the map of where we were getting hit everywhere. It was hit from central Vermont, the northeast portion of Vermont was hit hard, but Franklin and Chittenden County got hit. So it really was, unfortunately, wide-ranging damage. The road crews have been working really hard with the Agency of Transportation to keep things to open things back up as quickly as we can. But the only thing we can say about this storm is because it turned to snow, it didn't hit us quite as hard as it might otherwise have, because frankly, frozen water is better than rainwater when you're flooding. But we had plenty of damage, and the crews did a great job getting it together. It was widespread across Vermont. And we can give you the list of all the roads that were closed.
I didn't know if you had any numbers on culverts or washouts or anything like that.
We're still tallying it up, but
We are, Governor. Just before we started
come on
this,
over, Joe, because you'll get in trouble. They'll yell at you.
literally a minute before we started the press conference, I was handed a Post-it note from one local community that said they're now reporting 64 culverts, yet they're not considering those major. And as I said in my remarks, what we do right now is we begin the assessment working with RPCs and VTrans, even for the local community. So that's the process that's going on right now, and it's just starting to come in. So frankly, I think to answer your question fully, we still need a little bit more time today. But that's what we know as of this moment.
Thank you.
I just want to add that going forward, in addition to, we're hoping not to get deluged by water, but the lake is a big concern, and we've all been through this before. But when it gets to 100 feet, that's the trouble spot. It's getting to 100 feet. So for folks that live around the lake, you know, do all the things you usually do. Empty out the places that take away things of value from places that flood. Do everything that you can to prepare, and let's hope for the best.
Governor, now that there's more sort of substance to the legislature's look at an alternative to single-payer financing and single-payer plan, does that give you pause about the course that you're on?
No, and I think we might be reading a little too much into a two-page memo. Listen, we all know that there's going to be all kinds of plans and proposals before we're done, but we shouldn't be surprised that the consultant, as you know, that was hired by the legislature was involved in health care reform in the past in Vermont. It shouldn't surprise us that some folks are taking some old ideas and tuning them up, putting them back on the table. But here's the point. We're in this together. The legislature has approved, and I have signed legislation that commits Vermont to moving to the first sensible health care system in the country, where we have a single payer, where everyone has health care by right of citizenship of Vermont, and where we spend less money on health care for better outcomes. Everyone, I think, agrees that if we can achieve that, we're going to grow jobs, economic prosperity, and have a better quality of life than the states around us. Now, my own view is that middle-class Vermonters do not have any more money to subsidize other people's health care and then get asked to pay the health care premiums they've always had to pay. So there's a lot of reasons why our plan makes sense. I think the legislature will join us in passing that plan next year, in the next biennium, and we're looking forward to the debate.
And what specifically doesn't work with that plan? One of the stories in the VPR said that your administration had debated that notion at one point.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is that if you keep doing what you've always done and it's failing you, you have to ask what's the problem and what are we doing wrong? What has not worked, in my view, is healthcare costs that rise faster than we can afford, combined with the notion that middle-class Vermonters can subsidize the healthcare for people who don't have as much money and also pay rising healthcare premiums. It's a failed model that hasn't worked. So that's exactly what we're trying to get away from.
Is it the idea that you would still use the premium system to fund healthcare that you find problematic?
The current system is problematic. What I saw of the two-page memo, which didn't have a lot of, I haven't seen it. What I heard about the two-page memo is that it basically asks us to do what we've always done, which is raise taxes on hardworking Vermonters to pay for people that can't afford health care, and then ask Vermonters, the middle class, to also continue to pay rising health care premiums that they can't afford. It's just, it hasn't worked.
And when you were referring to the consultant's previous work, did you mean Catamount?
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, it is, you know, what I saw proposed is catamount on steroids, right? The notion that middle-class Vermonters have the capacity to not only pay ever-rising health care premiums, and businesses, frankly, to continue to pay ever-rising health care costs, but also that they have all kinds of extra money in their pockets to pay for health insurance for everybody else. It's a failed model.
Do you see this as a political problem, though, for you, if the legislature is fleshing out an idea that is so different from your own?
No, you know, I don't think that's what they're doing. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not in any conflict with the legislative leadership, and they're not in conflict with me. We're in this together. We are committed to Act 48 and the principles of Act 48. And they have a responsibility to look at all of the alternatives as we did. We looked at this model, and we rejected it for a lot of really good policy reasons. We've got to expect the legislature to do the same work, to do the due diligence. So we're not disagreeing in any way. The legislature is doing the right thing. They're hiring folks to help them look at all of the alternatives, and I suspect they'll come to the same conclusions that we did, which is the current system, whether you put it on steroids or not, will not work. The notion that the middle class can continue to afford health care premiums under the current system and come up with $200 million more to pay for folks who can't afford health care is a failed model.
Senator Mazza, I'm wondering what your sense of where the legislature is on this right now. Do you think that they're diverging from the governor's plan, or?
I don't think there's been a lot of effort at this point. We're waiting for the cost figures to come in, but other than that, there hasn't been a lot of emphasis on the whole package right now.
It's a job, as Senator Mott was pointing out, for the next legislature. We knew that all along. We didn't expect to ask them to work hard on it this year.
Can I go back to transportation for a second for the committee chairs or Sue? $115 million, what does that translate to? And during this winter, did you alter the plan much considering the winter?
Well, what 115 million is going to be, I believe, a couple hundred miles of road paved. We have a lot of different programs, and what we are looking at, new ways that we can actually approach some of this pothole and the damage of this winter, which really has been extraordinary. And I think in the coming weeks, working with the legislature and the governor, we're going to be sharing with you some ideas that we're going to be very aggressively treating spring pavement. But as for the federal issue, if that's what you're also referring to, we at this point are presenting a program banking essentially on the idea that the Congress will literally do its job to fill the Highway Trust Fund, which they are predicting now that in July, the Federal Highway Trust Fund will become insolvent. So they will not be able to continue to reimburse us at the rate they currently do. And that is a very serious concern of ours. We are coming up with ideas that we may have to take forward if, in fact, by late June, there is no change in Congress. We may have to hold back some of the projects that we know are needed and that we have planned to build next year based on the bill. But that's why we're raising this now. We have July staring us in the face. We cannot advance at expensive projects unless we know the feds can reimburse us for those. So that's why it's so important that we're raising this issue now. And there's a lot at risk, not only here in this state, but across the country. And I am in conversations with secretaries across the country that are very, very concerned and really believe that Congress needs to act now on this very important issue.
But with the 115, does more potholes being filled equal less miles being paved?
It can, absolutely. We have different ways that we can try to utilize our funds more efficiently. We're looking at different technologies to maybe do longer-lasting treatments. We are looking at doing things differently, and that's kind of the innovations that actually our governor asks of us all the time, and I'm asking of our team. We may not get as much as we want, so what can we do, and what can we do short-term to deal with some of the really incredible road challenges that many communities are facing?
I might add that it's 7% ahead of last year in the paving. And under normal conditions, this would be fine. But coming out of a winter with $9 million over, you put a different spin on things. But normally, with the $115 million, we're making progress. We're getting ahead of the curve. That's a large amount of money. We've had years we put $70 million into paving, but this year it's $115 million, 7% ahead of last year. But again, we have to reevaluate because no one ever dreamed we'd be $9 million over on winter maintenance.
That's a really important point that Senator Mazza just made, and Sue Minner. We're actually closing the gap in Vermont on a number of deficient bridges and the number of roads that are in need of payment that aren't getting it. We've been closing that gap. If the Federal Highway Transportation Fund is not funded, we will literally have to delay the work that we're doing to close that gap. We will have to put bridges projects on hold, and we'll have to say to our pavers, we can't pave as much as we thought. So D-Day is the end of June. We're saying to Congress, don't do this to Vermont, don't do this to America. All 50 governors are in the same boat. We will have to suspend projects that are critical to our transportation infrastructure.
Governor, last week you announced that you're going to use $28 million in an interloan fund to help pay for the teachers' retirement gap. And you've been said in the past that you've wanted to increase the state stabilization fund to 8%. And I'm wondering how these two things square, because it looks like you're going to end up cutting the stabilization reserve by a third by no longer making this cash pool money available. And it seems like it's almost like the Burlington City loan to Burlington Telecom. I wonder if you could address this issue.
We have, I should say, Treasurer Pierce has worked very closely with our folks in Wall Street to believe, who have led us to believe, and we trust their judgment, that our plan to address the teachers' retirement healthcare system shortfall will not adversely affect in any way our bond rating, which is what matters to me as governor. Having said that, listen, I inherited a problem we got to fix. We can't continue to dig into the cash reserves of the teachers' retirement health care fund to pay out benefits. You will go bankrupt. That's what has led that's what led to Detroit, all right? Doesn't work. So what I'm saying is, let's put forward the plan that we have to fix that problem. It's a responsible plan. And obviously, I'm committed to increasing our reserves as soon as we can to 8% instead of 5%. So first, teachers' retirement. Obviously, my next priority will be trying to increase our traditional, what we call rainy day fund or reserves from 5% to 8% as quickly as we know how. We can do both if we continue to grow jobs and economic opportunity, because Vermonters will pay more revenue as we do that. So we're on the right track.
But isn't it ultimately because you're up against the wall anyway? If it had slipped below 60%, then Moody's would have downgraded the state.
Well, sure. I mean, if we weren't up against the wall, if we hadn't inherited this problem, we wouldn't be trying to fix it. The responsible thing for a governor to do is say, hey, if we've got a retirement plan that's been committed to, where we're not able to pay the bills, we got to get together and fix that. And we've done a responsible thing by getting the parties together and coming up with a plan to fix it. So I'm proud of our proposal. I don't believe it will adversely affect our need to increase our reserves as quickly as we can from 5% to 8%. It may delay it briefly, but it won't stop us.
But next year, we face a $70 million budget gap. So if we continue to have these ongoing gaps, and if we have another recession, and the stock market isn't doing that well right now, how do we deal with that? I mean,
Well,
don't we need
first
that
of all,
extra money to pay our bills?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Ann, I'd re-examine your examination of the stock market. The stock market is at historic highs. Obviously, it goes up and down 1 or 2 or 3% in a month, but the stock market's doing very well. I believe that one of the reasons that Vermont is currently looking at roughly $5 million surplus in this fiscal year is because we're growing jobs and economic opportunity. And I continue to be optimistic that we can solve our teachers' retirement challenges and hopefully have good enough times that we can begin to build our reserves back up. Or I should say expand our reserves beyond the historic level of 5%. If we learned anything from the Great Recession, it is that 5% is not enough.
Is the Economic Development Fund that you started last week really designed to help IBM? They're going to be announcing layoffs this week, I understand.
Well, first of all, let me go to your comment that they're going to be announcing layoffs. If they're going to be announcing layoffs, you know something that we haven't been told. So I want to make that clear. We're in very close contact with IBM. We have not heard anything of that nature from IBM. Doesn't mean it won't happen. All I can tell you is I don't want to be concurring with your question, seeming to, because I don't have the information that you have. Having said that, the idea of the $5 million fund, what I call the jobs fund, is to give us an additional tool in the tool chest to either bring jobs in that we wouldn't get otherwise because of incentives from other states that are proven, that they can show us, or to help us retain research and development jobs, technology jobs, like we have at IBM. Now, I have read the same information that you have in the press about IBM. It's a publicly traded company, so obviously I don't comment on anything that I haven't read in the press. But having said that, as governor, I can tell you that those 4,000 jobs plus at IBM are incredibly important to our economy. And I'm going to do whatever I have to do, whatever I can do, to keep IBM, or if it's sold, as has been conjectured in the press, whatever entity owns it, growing and thriving in Vermont. That's my goal. And if I have to use some of that fund to do it, we will.
What kind of oversight will that money have? I mean, how will you hold companies accountable for the money they spend? It doesn't look like there's any mechanism in place like there is with the veggie program, for example.
Well, we can give you the right. It's definitely different than the veggie design. The veggie design is designed to add existing jobs. This fund gives me the flexibility when needed to be able to help us retain existing jobs so that we keep research and development, high-paying jobs, technology jobs in Vermont. As you know, we can give you the sheet, but there's a checks and balances where the Joint Fiscal Committee, along with, I believe, the chairs of the Economic Development Committees, will be joining us and concurring or rejecting any proposals that we come up with. So there's going to have legislative oversight. I think it's an incredibly important tool. There's not enough tools, sensible tools, that the legislature can give me to help us continue to grow jobs and retain jobs in this state.
Governor, the House appears to be scaling back the toxic chemicals bill that passed the Senate a few weeks ago to just include products generally used by children. Do you think do you favor sort of a more expansive version of that bill, like one the Senate passed, or do you think it should only apply to kids?
Well, as you know, I don't comment too much on bills until they get to me. I obviously work with the leadership to try get a bill that we can all support. I should mention that I've been one of the big supporters of getting chemicals that adversely affect human health out of products in Vermont. I was one of the sponsors of the DECA bill, worked with the firefighters to get that passed, was very instrumental in the BPA bill that we signed into law. So, I join Vermonters in wanting to get chemicals that adversely affect our health out of the system. We're going to do what we can as a small state to influence that development, since the federal government, in my view, isn't working as aggressively as we all might wish. In terms of the bill, I'm going to let the Senate and the House do their work. It'll come to me. We'll try get a bill that I can sign.
I mean, you're a health commissioner and are been pretty involved in this discussion. Just speaking very big picture, do you think it should encompass all products or just ones that the children are primarily using?
I think we should pass a sensible bill that works, and that's what I'm going to work towards.
Vermont's poised to be the first state in the nation to approve the GMO labeling if you sign it as well. Is that something you support?
I never comment, as you know, on bills until I see them or whether I'll sign them or not. All I can tell you is that I firmly believe that Vermonters deserve to know what's in their food. And it seems to me a basic right that you should be able to go to the grocery store, pick up a product, and find out what you're buying. So I applaud both the House and the Senate for their great work on that bill. And I hope that we can all come to a meeting of the minds to have a bill signed into law that has Vermont lead on this important issue.
Are you worried about possible lawsuits?
Well, you know, I don't like to project too much about future lawsuits. I've expressed in the past some concern about lawsuits. As you know, there's been plenty of discussion of lawsuits on the floor of both the House and the Senate as they've debated this bill. All I can tell you is we're trying to write a bill that stands up in court, and I believe we will.
Can you speak a little broadly about that GMOs bill, and you've got an eye down the road about a lawsuit? So Hydro a couple weeks ago, even though we took a different approach, Massachusetts yesterday, a judge just threw it out. How do you govern with an eye and a concern for law and legal action down the road?
You know, you have to be prudent, frankly. You know, I didn't choose, first of all, I commend Governor Patrick for having the courage to take the stand that he did on Hydro. When I looked at the options, I felt that it wouldn't be very long if I did that before a federal judge struck it down, and that's obviously what happened in Massachusetts. It was worth a try. It didn't cost Massachusetts a lot of money to make that argument. The GMO discussion is a little different. I believe that we now have a bill that has passed the Senate and the House coming to me that is legally defensible, and that's a little bit different than the action that was taken by Massachusetts on Hydro, which is why I didn't choose to take the same action. So I see them differently.